Good afternoon and welcome to Alyth Common Good Fund Committee of the 22nd of May 2023. First item on the agenda is appointment of convener. Do I have any nominations, please? Councillor Anderson.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Grant Stewart as convener.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Happy to second that nomination.
Super. Thank you both. Councillor Stewart, would you like to join me at the top table?
Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Alyth Common Good Fund, 22nd of May 2023. Welcome to everybody here physically and those online. I would like to first ask the clerk, Ms Gould, to confirm any apologies in a roll call, please.
Thank you, convener. We have apologies from Councillor Lang. We've got one member online, Councillor Welch. Could you please confirm you're present?
Present.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chamber, convener.
Thank you. I would like to advise the people online and the committee that we're going to be joined by Grant Train, who I believe is going to join us online. And Mr. Train is the chair of the Alyth Community Council, and he'll be joining us as an advisor and a non-voting member of the committee. Mr. Train, would you like to acknowledge the meeting?
Oh yeah, yep, sorry, I didn't realise that you asked me to say hello.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Can I ask the committee, is there any declarations of interest? There appears to be no declarations of interest. Members will have had access to the previous minutes chaired by my colleague Councillor Colin Stewart. Can we approve the minutes?
Agreed.
Councillor Welsh?
Agreed.
Thank you. Any matters arising from the minutes of the 2018 meeting? Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks. It was just to ask formally what the final outturn for the last application that we considered back in June 2018 was.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
The last application was for the Alyth show for £660. That was the final outturn. Thank you.
As there's no further matters arising, we'll move to item 6, application for financial assistance. I will ask Mr. Haxton, Community Planning and Policy Team Leader, to introduce the report. Mr. Haxton, please.
Thank you, Convener. Happy to do so. A fairly straightforward application, and I believe one which used to come in regularly up until the COVID outbreak, kind of put the kibosh on events like this. So it's an application for £1,200 from the Alyth Agricultural Show to run the show in this calendar year. As with all common good applications, payment is made in arrears, so they would need to demonstrate the expenditure that they've incurred before any grant is paid out. Myself and Jacob are both on the call and happy to answer any questions that members might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haxton. Can I ask if there's any questions to the paper?
I have a question.
Councillor Anderson.
I just wondered, is there a date fixed for the show 2023?
Mr. Haxton, do you have that information?
Yeah, the date that's in the application is Saturday the 17th of June.
Thank you. Councillor Welch.
I don't have a question, sorry, Grant.
My apologies. Mr. Train, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, I haven't seen the application, but where is the show going to be held?
Mr.
Jacob, do you have the
Haxton.
exact location to hand? And I know it's in Blairgowrie, but I don't have the name of the exact field to hand. Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, it is Bogglesfield in Blairgowrie, where they have held the event in previous years, I do believe.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions, Mr. Train?
Nope.
Councillor Collins Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. I think one of the concerns that had been raised previously was to do with allocating Common Good Fund money from Alyth to an event that happens outside. I note that this one is specifically for 4 different events, and I just wondered whether any of these specific items are routinely based, you know, whether they organise it, obviously Blairgowrie and District Pipe Band isn't, but whether any of the demonstrating events are routinely based in the Alyth borough.
Happy to take that one, Convener. I'm afraid we don't have that information. We would need to go and check with the applicant directly if members wish to know.
Any further questions? Councillor Anderson.
It's not a question, it's probably more information as such, that these events that are listed, specific items, they will all take place on the show day as such to bring people into the show. I think the show, this is the first time since COVID that the show is taking place, and it's not a knife edge as such, but it's, I can remember speaking to 1 or 2 of the organisers this morning, and they were talking about they try an income maybe up to 40,000, the total expenditure of around about 38,000. They're having an auction sale next week, I think it is, to raise funds for the show. It's based, I say, some of the Blairgowrie District Pipe Band members come from Alyth anyway. We're talking about, it's quite a wide area. Agricultural shows draw people in from a reasonable area, and I say it's taking place the place where it took place the previous time anyway, and they're quite pleased with that location, the organisers anyway, to give representation within the whole agriculture and the local area. So it's just the specific items demonstrated are one of the things that take place during the actual show day.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I think there were some comments there. Mr. Haxton. Mr. Haxton, do you think you could answer some of Councillor Anderson's queries there?
Apologies, Convener, I didn't pick up any queries there. I think Councillor Anderson was just stating that the events, although the providers of the events might not be based within the Alyth or Blairgowrie communities, that they are all taking place on the showgrounds. The only information we have is what's contained in the application, which is relatively light touch, and the amounts are based on the quotes that they have provided. If there are specific questions, we can try our best, but as with my previous answer, I mean, we may need to go back to the applicant if there's more detail required.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. So just thinking about it, two further questions. There may be certain pots of funding available to the Alyth and District Show organisers which are relevant but not common good funds. So, for example, I'm thinking of the recent decision by Finance and Resources to widen out access to the events licensing earmarked reserve, potentially other funds. Have officers pointed the organisers to other sources of funds?
The short answer to that is no, given that the fund balance, I believe, at Alyth is around about £20,000. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been an application for 5 years, and the grant is for the full amount for an event that's, according to the application, to benefit a significant number of common good area residents. If committee decided that they didn't want to award the full amount or any grant at all, then we would of course go back to the applicant explaining that and suggesting alternative funding sources that they could look to go to.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful. And then the other question was, I guess it's more a question of just putting something on record, but is anyone aware that certain of the events which would normally take place at the Alyth show one-day event are actually proposed to be held at other times this year and potentially brought back into Alyth district rather than held outside the ward?
I think we will take that as a comment, Councillor Stewart. Thank you. There appears to be no further questions, so could I ask the committee to move towards thinking about a decision about awarding the funds? Councillor Anderson.
I would move that we grant the Alyth District Agricultural Show the £1,200 grant for this year. Fine, it takes place and everything else.
Do we have any amendments to that? Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. I think that given the response from the committee 5 years ago, which was specifically to write to the show organisers saying that we might not be able to support this event in future years, given the fact that it is the concern raised at the time, and I think the concern now is that it's an event that's held not only outside Alyth and District, but outside or the environs of Alyth, but outside actually Strathmore Ward, and it's held in Blairgowrie in the Glens Ward. Given the fact that some of those events could, some of the events which would normally take place may come, are scheduled later in the year and can be held back in the Alyth Borough, and we could potentially look to supporting those events actually within Alyth itself. and that there may be other funds that the organisers could be encouraged to bid into. I think it'd be appropriate, following our previous year's continuing support of the show, to refuse the application on this occasion, but with a commitment that we can support, that we as the Common Good Fund or the Council more generally can point to other sources of support.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Do we have we've got a motion to agree the funds from Councillor Anderson. Do we have a seconder for that proposal?
Can I just make a comment, Grant, please?
Go ahead.
Two things. It may be appropriate, and I note Colin's comments that a letter had already been issued to the group with regards to potentially accessing funding from elsewhere rather than the Common Good Fund. I think if we do go ahead and make an award, I think that they should be reminded of that. Potentially, and maybe steps taken to point them in the direction of potential other award bodies. And the other aspect, obviously, is recognising that there are significant funds in the Common Good Fund, and just to understand how much in the way of promotion of the fund is done within the appropriate and eligible area for the fund.
I think these are comments, Councillor Welsh.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. We'll have to move to making a decision about granting the funds, and Councillor Anderson was making a motion to grant the funds, and Councillor Colin Stewart was looking for an amendment to not grant the funds and look at other income. They would have to look at other income streams, and we use the Common Good money to do events and within the town area. So with that in mind, are you going to second the motion or second the amendment?
Are you asking me that specifically, Grant?
Yes.
I would. I'm minded that the fund has significant assets in it at the moment, and I'm not aware of any other applications at the moment. At the end of the day, I think because of COVID and them looking to sort of slightly change the format of the event this year, albeit I understand it's not within Ward 2, but I understand that does not deem it ineligible. I would be minded to support the funding application.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Thank you. I was taking some advice. So I take it you're going to second the motion put forward by Councillor Anderson.
I would be happy to second that, albeit that a letter is written confirming that they should seek other funding options for next year and provide some support for them to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Welsh. Do we have any seconders for the amendment not to grant the funds? The amendment falls. We, MD, any members wish to make comment? Mr. Train, I see that you've got a comment.
Yeah, so if one of the concerns of the committee is that there's been a lack of applications over the last 5 years, I've only been in Alyth for 2 years, but I didn't know the existence of this fund. But I'm now involved in quite a lot of community groups and can encourage projects that are looking for funds to apply, as I think a lot of them don't know about it either. I think that's part of the that is the issue with the lack of applications. It's not a lack of stuff going on in Alyth. It's just a lack of knowledge of the fund, you know. So we can certainly encourage more applications in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Train. I value your comments. We will move to item 7 on our agenda, the 2022-23 and the 2023-24 financial statements. I'd invite Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, convener. Obviously, we've issued the report, but on Friday we also issued an elected member briefing note giving the history of the fund since 2018-19, since the fund had not met since June 2018, so it hadn't been updated on the fund activity over those additional 4 years. So what that gave us is a starting point in 22-23 of 20,503. There hasn't been any activity in 22-23. The only other issue is there is some interest that's been earned. It's not part of the financial statement, but we think that will be around about £100. So that will get added to the 20,503 and get carried forward into 23-24. As I say, it's not the final position. We're still closing the accounts for all the common goods. So it'll be within that magnitude. Any questions on 22-23 or any of the previous year's activities?
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah. Just one of the assets, the funding of the common good, is it purely a cash sum it's invested rather than there's no land with income or anything else from it? It's just purely. Yeah. No.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Councillor Anderson, can you switch? Because people online won't hear what Mr. Robertson's saying. Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, it's just a cash balance. You don't earn any rental income. You don't have any assets other than that cash balance that generates an interest for you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, convener. A moment ago, we didn't move to a vote. Had it been so, I would have abstained, because I think wherever possible, in normal circumstances, even convener finance and resources, I think it should be up to local members to take a decision on specific applications, and that is what has happened here. And I think there's going to be communication, though, also to look for the future for alternative sources of funding. What I'd like to ask, though, is one thing, and that's of Mr. Robertson. And this is perhaps more general with common good funds, the smaller ones, and I'm thinking of CREEF, where we have, which has been reasonably active over the last few years, and we put on a cap of £500 on applications. With Alyth, is there any cap on applications? Is the maximum in total that can be applied for in any 1 year 1,200. It's just for members to know. Thanks.
I'm not aware of any cap, but I'll maybe ask my colleague Lee Haxton if he's aware of anything for Alyth.
I confess, Craig, this is the first application I've encountered for Alyth since I joined the council back in 2018. I'm not aware of there being any cap on this Common Good Fund.
Okay, it was just to clarify, and yes, it's been inactive for effectively 5 years. So hopefully today it might highlight to people locally that there is this potential source of funding, and I think that's a good thing.
Is there any questions on 22-23 financial statements or the elect member briefing note for the historical fund activities before going to 23-24?
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. So the only income that's deriving to the fund is interest on the cash holding. It looks like it's somewhere under 1%. I thought that all of the common good funds and charitable trusts were bundled up and those investments were handled by an investment manager. Are we only getting sort of bank-based interest rates, or are there? I'll let you answer that first.
So we get interest and revenue balances from our colleagues in Treasury who invest, and the overall common good funds get an income back that's a portion between how much they have. In 22-23, the interest rate was 1.5%. The start of the year it was at 0.75, and at the end of the year it was 4. And it depends on how much they've invested over that point in time. Although they did put in, I think it was 20,000 or 27,000 on a temp deposit. But take that offline and get more information for you if that would help.
I think what I'm driving at is, are we only getting bank interest as opposed, or short-term deposit interest, as opposed to actually being invested in something with potentially higher risk but potentially higher reward? Something which would guarantee a 5% return or a 7% return, something like that.
But yeah, you're only getting relatively low interest. But what I could do is, I think it's split between your interest on your revenue balance, and then there's an element that you put on a temp deposit. But I could find out what the rates are that you've got then. And obviously the issue is if you do have more applications coming in, you need to hold funds, so you can actually put it all out. You need to hold back money in a reserve to actually pay out any applications you've got potentially if you put it out for longer than a matter of weeks. But what we'll do is we'll come back to you and provide information.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
Councillor Welch.
Yeah, it's very much to reinforce Colin's concern here, especially with high inflation rates. Effectively, what we're saying is, under the sort of current method of holding this money and investing it, effectively we're eroding the value for future applicants in terms of the overall fund value, significantly declining in these high inflation times. So I would ask that there's mechanisms looked at to see how we can ensure that an appropriate return and risk is met, and maybe this aspect of how we keep a suitable balance, aside, is something that is agreed and is maybe looked at over the whole of the common good funds, so that ultimately that element of withdrawal is managed in an efficient way rather than just on an ad hoc individual fund basis.
All the funds are grouped together for the interest you get on revenue balances. I think, as I say, 22-23, the rates you were getting was about 1.51%, which was an average between the 0.75 at the start of the year and the 4% by the end of the year because the interest rise. And in 23-24, they're projecting 3.95% at this point in time. So the rates, obviously, all interest rates are increasing, but what we can do is specifically look at the Alyth one and see if there's any options for doing anything further, and also I'll come back to you with a paper on where your elements are interested in revenue balances and where you can put out time deposits and what sort of rates you'd be looking at in that market.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's no further questions. We'll move to comments. And I think Councillor Welch, you were giving us some comments there on the paper. Councillor Anderson.
It's probably going on from what Jack's comments were as such, but having had the tail end of the Perth Common Good Fund over there, there's something in their budget that protects the funds as such from inflation. I thought I heard something, 16,500 something that you said was allowed for of the spend, protecting the spend to protect the value of the funds. That's, and you're saying that Alyth is in a separate entity from that.
So Perth's Common Good Fund, they had their original budget was last year was £6,000. It got their income and interest had gone up to 16,000. So their budget in 23-24 had increased to 60,000. So consistent with that in Alyth, we're projecting that you're going to get approximately £100 in interest in a year. So when you look at 23-24, what we've put in is your interest there, and we've put that up, projected at 800. Obviously, it all depends on interest rates, but that's what we're looking at this point in time as a projection. And then obviously we'll monitor that as the year goes by.
My apologies, Councillor Anderson. That was me jumping to asking about comments now. That was a question. I apologise. I don't see any comments coming in. So can we agree to the report? Agreed. And that brings us to the end of the Alyth Common Good Fund for 22nd of May. Thank you for all your participation, for your questions, and the officers and the clerk's work.